The F2 Fan 5000's Formula 2 Australian race recap, and it's a very disappointing session. Very upset that the feature race got cancelled, and yet somehow there's still a lot to talk about. For me, the main talking point is that we haven't really learnt anything about where these drivers are at, where the pecking order is, where the teams are. We've learned a little bit. The sprint race was a little bit chaotic, but we still got some laps in. Qualifying is probably the least interrupted session. Anyway, on to the driver ratings. I'm not going to be, generally, a couple of exceptions, I'm not going to be too positive or negative because of the nature of the weekend. But let's get started. Leonardo Fornaroli, second in the sprint race, 10th in qualifying, but I'll give him a 7 out of 10. Handled the weekend well. Had an uncharacteristic mistake in qualifying. It's very rare you see Fornaroli make mistakes, but was his first weekend. Raymond Stanek, I'll give a 6 to. He's qualified in the top 10. He drove well enough to finish 6th in the sprint race. He was overtaken by... No, he finished 5th in the sprint race, sorry. He was overtaken by Beganovic. And then Beganovic sort of saw him up the inside, wanted to give him room. Beganovic spun. It's not really Stanek's fault. That's on Beganovic, so I'll give Stanek a 6. Pepe Marti, I'll give him a... I know his qualifying was very underwhelming. Somehow he's recovered to 8th place. He's, obviously benefited from other people's grid penalties, so I'll give him a 5 out of 10. Arvid Lindblad, I'll give him a 5 out of 10. It's his first weekend. He out-qualified Pepe Marti, finished behind him in the race. There's not much more I can say. Oliver Goethe, I'll give him a 4 out of 10. He was involved in a lot of incidents. Some of them were not his fault. I suppose recovering to 11th in the sprint race is fine. But, he's had a lot of incidents. It was a bit action-packed for Goethe. As I said, not all his fault, but I don't think anyone watching that weekend is going, he's on my watch for future Formula 1 driver. No, not at all. That was sloppy. Richard Verschoor gets a 7. Classy as always. 4th from the sprint race is pretty good. Luke Browning, I'll give him a 7. I was impressed with how he was very fast. He got ahead of some other drivers. Was pushing for second in the sprint race and didn't make any mistakes, didn't make any silly lunges, didn't crash. Impressed. Dino Beganovic, I'll give a 4. He was quick, he had pace, but he's had a spin. We're not seeing the end of 2024 Dams era. I just don't know what happened here. Sebastian Montoya, I'll give him a 6. His qualifying was poor. He was benefited from other people getting grid penalties, and he's held his position. So for that, I'll give him a 6. Gabriele Mini, it's a case what might have been. Is there a feature race here gone wasted for him? He did well, I suppose, to make those positions in the sprint race, but he got stuck behind Sebastian Montoya, so I give him a 6 out of 10. I know I feel this whole weekend has been unfair on Gabriele Mini. He was in the zone, and any opportunity he's had to prove what he can do has been taken away. I know he's blocked Crawford in qualifying, but that's not fair at all. Jack Crawford, I'll give him a 5 out of 10. Qualified well, his car retired early on in the race. That's all you can say. Kush Miney, I'll give him a 0 out of 10 because he's an experienced driver and he's spun in qualifying and he spun on the opening lap. He's supposed to be a safe pair of hands, and he's not at all. He's bringing rookie mistakes. And then Victor Martins gets the lowest score. I'm sorry, but I'll give Victor Martins a -10. This is supposed to be his year, a year of reprieve. Actually, I think Victor Martins, two things about him. He should have won, or at least he should have been higher up the order in 2023. I think he had all the pace to win the 2023 Formula 2 Championship, but a series of high-profile errors brought him undone, put him back in the points standings. I know that, he's a rookie in 2023, but he's an old rookie, highly experienced. I think he should have, finished third in that championship at the bare minimum. He's regularly qualifying at the front, the fastest qualifier across the season, and I thought 2024 was the year he learnt those lessons. Very tough year, but I was very impressed with Victor Martins last year in the second half with that struggling ART car. He's brought them back up where they can get podiums, and this season looks like ART have got on top of the car. He's qualified on the front row for the feature race, and in the sprint race, first corner he's off into the grass. Second lap, into the wall. His stock from this race has gone down more than the whole of last season. The last season, that was on his car. This race he's one of the most experienced drivers in F2, one of the most highly rated drivers in F2, and to just start like that, straight into the wall, it's a disaster. It's unmitigated disaster for Victor Martins. I'm very disappointed. I'll give him a -10. I'm sorry, but then Ritomo Miyata, I'll give him a 0. Absolutely no pace in qualifying. And then in the sprint race, just had a spin. Looks sloppy. It's back to 2024 all over again. No, all this talk of improvement is just out the window. Then we have Rodin. Omri Cordeel, I'll give him a 1. Missed pre-season, but he was outclassed by Alex Dunn. And Alex Dunn, I'd like to give him a 9. I think he deserves a 9. I feel silly giving a driver that didn't score points a 9, but, his qualifying was excellent. And this is what, he's a real rookie. He's never even had a race weekend before. He's just put it on 5th, ahead of a lot of more highly rated drivers like Browning, Bogdanovich, Fornaroli, Lindblad, all those drivers, he's in front of them. That's amazing that he's made 7 places in the sprint race, even though the 70 laps under the safety car. He's done an excellent job, but, he walks away with no points. So, and then Joshua Dirksen, he gets an 8. He drove wonderfully. He benefited from the reverse grid nature of the weekend. But he won the race, so I've got to give him an 8, right? And Cheryl Shields, I'll give him a 4 out of 10. Nothing special, but nothing too bad. Sammy Megatunov, I'll give him a 0 out of 10. Max Esterson gets a 0 out of 10. John Bennett gets a 3 out of 10 because he was last on the road. Rafael Villagomez gets a 5 out of 10. Villagomez is a little bit underrated. At least he's a very clean, except for the Belgian race last year. He's generally a clean driver, brings the car home, is reliable, isn't that slow. So I'll give him a 5 out of 10. I gave Max Esterson a 0. I feel sorry for him though. It's hard to step up from being an iRacer to a real life racer. Formula 2's fast. For some reason, this track always produces the crashes, Always crashes at this circuit. Dennis Hauger in the race. Victor Martins again in qualifying. It was all crash. Enzo Fittipaldi, it's just... I don't think it's a good season opener for Formula 2. It's just people watch a new Formula 2 season and the opening race, everyone's crashing and there's red flags and qualifying, safety cars. I don't know why this track, what about it causes this problem. It seems worse than Jeddah, right? Jeddah it's really high, fast, left, right. The walls are right there, but this track just creates a lot more chaos than Jeddah. I don't know what it is about this track. Some might say exciting racing, but this weekend has been very frustrating. And we've got a whole new month to wait for the next race. We have testing in that time period, so it feels like a reset. It feels like Bahrain's the real opener of the Formula 2 season this year, and the points that have been scored so far don't really matter. It's just 10 points for Dirksen. Good on him. And then it's not far to catch up for the others. Doesn't really account for a lot. But I suppose on a bright note, I am impressed with Dirksen. To me, the three drivers that really stood out for me are Dirksen, Mini and Dunn. Alex Dunn. These three drivers, I'm happy with. Those three, they did a good job. Although Dirksen didn't really do the business in qualifying. But definitely the race, yeah. So Dirksen, Mini and Dunn, they're the impressive drivers from this race. They can take some positives from that. And they've got another 13 rounds to rinse and repeat. Before we even got to practice, there was a lot to talk about because 6 drivers are getting a double 10-place grid penalty. I think the FIA has gone about this whole weekend the wrong way. I know that something wrong happened. I know that these 3 teams, Rodin, Trident and Dams, have done something illegal to the car. I think they've put a sensor inside the diffuser and they weren't supposed to. There should be a penalty, but it seems as though the drivers are the ones carrying the burden of the penalty more than the teams. I don't think that's wrong. The whole point of this championship is to determine who are the best young drivers coming through, and we're not getting that information if they have to continually serve 10 place grid penalties. And then I just want to come, before I even talk about practice, I just want to emphasise, in face of all the criticism this series received last year, claims of it being illegitimate and not giving the correct account of where the drivers are at. And I'm going to stand up for F2, but this time what the FIA and F2 have done here is absolutely wrong. Look at this. When you look at qualifying, everyone watched qualifying, right? Gabriele Mini jumps out of the car, he's ecstatic, he's on pole, and after him, Martins was in second, Crawford third, Bashaw fourth, Dunn fifth, right? Alex Dunn. So if the F2 feature race would have gone ahead, then they would have lined up Martins on pole, Bashaw second, Stanek in third, Mini down to fourth, and Dino Bogdanovic in fifth. This is a drastic change in the qualifying order. I think things like this confuse people when they watch Junior Feeder Series Motorsport. Like, don't they realise that? Don't they realise they're defeating the whole purpose of this championship by forever jumbling up grids and handing penalties and grid drops here and there? We're supposed to be determining who are the best young drivers, but this stuff is changing championship positions, and I think in some way it's lucky that race was cancelled, because if it had gone ahead, it would have been a wet race. Let's say it had been like the F3 race where they did a few laps and a lot of laps under safety car and they give full points. then the drivers that really there's 3 drivers here that are really quick, Minnie, Crawford and Alex Dunn, who would have been punished and it would have given a big advantage to their rivals who in terms of their qualifying, didn't earn that advantage. And I don't think that's a true meritocracy, a true representation of what happened. And so in a way I'm glad that it's a good thing that the race got cancelled. Of course, I'm very disappointed. I think these drivers should be learning how to drive in the wet. They should learn those skills. And also, we'll have to question. I know that this Albert Park circuit gives a lot of, exciting, crashy races. But is it really a good track for feeder series to go to? I mean, even in the dry, the drivers are struggling to keep it on the road. There are a litany of incidents. There's red flags in quali, safety cars. We saw 3 safety cars in the sprint race. As we saw with F3, the order was all jumbled after quali because most drivers didn't get a representative lap. Lucky they did here, but as I said, with all the penalties and stuff, everything was changed. And, I have to throw all this stuff out there because I'm very disappointed about the whole weekend, how it turned out. And even Minnie got pole. They gave the 2 because he got the blocking penalty. And I'm not saying he shouldn't get a grid drop for a block, right? But because he got that penalty, they've given the 2 points for pole to Victor Martins. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Victor Martins, but that's not fair. Victor Martins didn't get the pole position. Gabriele Mini is the one that found the pace in qualifying. He put in the lap. He should keep those 2 points for pole position. It makes no sense to give it to Martins. It's not like last year when Kush Miney, what happened? Yeah, because he had an illegality on his car. That's why he was disqualified. That's a different matter. That means there's something illegal on the car giving him an advantage. But in this case, it's a blocking penalty. And even if Minnie blocked Crawford, but he still put in the fastest lap of qualifying, and he shouldn't have those 2 points taken away. Okay, so all this happened before we even can talk about practice. And then when it comes to practice, well, we can't talk about practice. I've got some notes here. There's not much running, right? Endless red flags. Alex Dunn crashed early on. It's his first weekend in F2 car, so I don't want to bash anyone here. First race of the season, but Goethe had a spin. His car stopped out on track. Then Lindblad and Cordeal crashed. Victor Martins and Dirksen and then Verschoor got some laps in. They sort of saw the little gap. They kind of realised, maybe they're not going to get a lot of time here, so they maximised their opportunity to put in laps. And then we go to qualifying. So, in the first run of quali laps, Leonardo Fornaroli went fastest, and he's massaged his tyres, and then he saved them so that he could put 2 purple sectors together in his third push lap. I was very impressed with that. Unfortunately, he didn't improve on the second lot of runs, and in fact spun on his final push lap. But in the first lot of runs, he had the ability to save that super soft tyre for a third push lap, which put him at the top of the timesheet at that point. Very impressed with that. He's a rookie, so maybe the spin is what you expect. And after the first lot of runs, Chance Shields was slowest than anyone else by a second. Oliver Goethe and Sammy Megatunov were impacted by incidents on the first run of push laps, and this meant they ended up running in the gap. That's right. Gurther and Megatoon have had incidents. So to run in the gap means they don't get to really go for it on the final run. I suppose they don't have to go in the gap. They could just wait for the final run. But on the second run or the final run, a lot of the first push laps, and there would have been hot laps there, Kush Miney's had a spin, a highly experienced driver, but he's caused a yellow flag and it's impacted other drivers. I think that should be a penalty, like having a spin, causing yellow and red flags, impacting other drivers. Someone there somewhere else lost. We haven't seen it, but they've lost a hot lap because of Kush Miney's yellow flag spin. During qualifying, Montoya and Megatoon were off the track a few times. Gabriele Meni puts in the fastest lap to take pole. He's 7/10 faster than the times Leonardo Fornaroli set in the first lot of running. And Victor Martins is second fastest. Crawford is third. Vasseur is fourth. And Alex Dunn, on debut, has done a fantastic job to qualify fifth. And as I said before, it's all for nothing. He gets sent to the back of the grid. And here's the other thing, right? We've seen the only race we had this weekend was a reverse. It's going to confuse people because, look, Gabriele Meni was the fastest driver in qualifying, and in the only race, he's starting from 13th on the grid. Like, it's confusing and it's not rewarding the fastest drivers. But I don't know, that's the way they wanted it at the moment. Last thing on qualifying, Arvid Lindblad had a purple sector. He was going quick on one lap and then he had a slow last sector. We never saw what happened, whether it was he made a mistake or someone blocked him or whatever. In the F2 sprint race, I'm just not impressed with a lot of people. I'm really not. It was underwhelming generally. Joshua Dirksen was marvellous. He just whooshed on the line like a rocket and he kept the lead. He was never going to lose it. He looked commanding all race. Fornaroli, Browning had a nice battle for second place. Fornaroli withstood a lot of pressure. Vasseur was there as well. Dirksen was wonderful on the restarts. Gabriele Meni made up 6 places in his Prema from 13th to 7th. And Alex Dunn, again, he's walking away from this round with no points, but he's qualified 5th and he's made the most amount of overtakes in the sprint race to go from 16th on the grid to 9th in the race. Beganovic, the high tech looks quick, but Beganovic had a spin. So high tech, their race pace is solid. Their qualifying pace could probably improve a bit, but they're both qualified in the top 10. Victor Martin's very disappointing. Rotomo Miata he's just picked up where he left off last year. He's been slow. He's been slow in the race. He had a moment off track. For me, Roman Stanek finishing high up the order, 5th place, I want to say maybe Invicta have a very good, nice car this year. So I'm not particularly impressed though. And at the back of the field, like my pre-season prediction, somewhere I mentioned, I think Trident are going to finish last in the team's championship, and I'm not sure if their prediction's going to hold. But Megatoon and Esterson look they don't look ready for F2. I feel like both of them should have done another season of F3. I don't see the rush to move up for these drivers. They've both crashed in the race. And Esterson had that moment in qualifying. In his defence, I have to say Esterson was an esports driver. He's made the jump to real life. So there's, you have to appreciate what he's doing. He's now in Formula 2. A lot of the esports drivers, like that's an amazing achievement just to make it that far. But he looked reasonable in F3 last year. I think another season in F3 would have been fine for Esterson. He just doesn't look ready. He might improve in the coming rounds. Again, there's not much to glean from this weekend. Like, practice was, we can't say that much. I mean, Montoya, he's qualified poorly, but because of all the grid penalties, he's come up the order, and then there's a reverse grid, and then other people's incidents. So he's kept on the road for points. He wasn't able to get past Stanek, but he kept his teammate Mini behind him. That's a positive, I suppose. I'm just disappointed the whole week. I really am upset the feature race got cancelled. I think these drivers need to go out there and learn how to drive in the wet. And if this circuit, the barriers are there, right next to the road, and if one car hits the barrier, he ricochets back into the middle of the road, so that's not safe. We've seen that happen before. Maybe this is not the right circuit for feeder series racing, but that's the analysis done. I don't think there's much to. I'm just disappointed with the FIA, the whole handling of everything. There's a few bright spots, but I think the best thing I can say is that coming away from this weekend, the points, whatever happened, it doesn't really matter. They're a very small amount of points in the grand scheme of things. The drivers just have to focus on the remaining 13 rounds. This Australia round doesn't count for much. Well, as I said, I think it's a good thing. I don't know what's going to happen with all these grid penalties. There's 7 drivers with grid penalties, and is that going to be carried over to the next race, the next weekend? I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully, if they do that, it's only for the sprint race in Bahrain. There's also more testing coming. It's a mess, really. This whole F2, F3 weekend at Melbourne was a mess, but not in a good sort of exciting, fun, chaotic way like, Silverstone last year, or Belgium 2023 where Taylor Barnard won. That was sort of chaos, but it was great chaos. This is sort of very underwhelming. Maybe there's a an upside to the F2 not driving in these conditions, but I think they should learn it. Actually, thinking back on it, I think when they knew that Sunday would be a heavy rain, when they knew that it would rain heavily on Sunday, they should have pre-planned, thought, okay, let's move the feature race to the Saturday so we can have a proper race, hand out the proper points. Should have done that for F2, because when it's heavy rain at a circuit like that where the barrier's always right there, high chance you're going to get a red flag situation. I still think, F2, they have full wet weather tyres, not intermediates. I think these drivers need to learn how to drive in the rain. I don't see why they can't at least give it a go. And of course, they delayed it at the start, and the longer they delayed it, the heavier the rain got. They could have got going when at the original start time. They might have got half a race in, but as I said, if they are worried about the wet weather when they knew it was going to be heavy rain, which I saw, I heard about it. I looked at my weather app, and it you could see that it was very unpredictable conditions. When they knew that, they should have moved the feature race to Saturday. Anyway,